Today we are interviewing Adeen Postar, who since 2004 has been the Deputy Director at the American University Washington College of Law Pence Law Library. Indeed, I might mention, Adeen, that you are sort of our host today, you and Billy Joe, your director, in that we're here in the faculty library of the law school. And it's a nice venue, and I certainly appreciate you inviting me to come here to do today's interviews.
We're delighted
this
to
one.
have you.
Yeah. Let's begin with a little bit of personal history about yourself. Could you tell us a little bit about what your life was like when you were young and perhaps even today?
Well, I was born in Chicago, Illinois, and I grew up in Skokie, Illinois. I'm the daughter of first-generation Americans. Their parents came over from Europe shortly before the Second World War, or in one case a couple of decades before, but most of them came in the 1930s. I had a wonderful childhood. I was the oldest of 3 kids. I went to public schools, Evanston Township High School, and then on to college in St. Louis at Washington University, and I went to law school there too. So I am a Midwestern girl, and I think I still speak like I'm from Chicago. And I'm here because my husband, who went to GW, always wanted to come back to D.C., and his practice area, he's an attorney, I met him in law school, is based in D.C. He does energy work, so he practices before the FERC, so here we are.
I imagine he keeps pretty busy with all the
Yes, he does.
activities in the energy business that are going on around the country these days.
Yes, he does.
Yeah, of course, I understand, knowing your position here at the library, that you're fairly busy as well.
I am fairly busy, yes.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned you have a law degree.
Yes.
And could you talk a little bit about your degrees and perhaps where you got the others?
Well, I went to undergrad and majored in history, and for some time I entertained the notion of being a history professor, going on for a PhD. But at the time I graduated, I didn't think there was much of a market for that. It would be too difficult to get a job after all those years going for graduate school, and the thought of law intrigued me. I graduated law school in 1980, and I wouldn't say it was unusual for a woman to go to law school then, but it was not very common. Still, even at that time.
Transformation of the profession was underway, but still early on.
Yes. I was certainly not in the first wave, but in the second wave, I would say.
Yeah.
And I thought I would practice law. And I did for about 2 years after I graduated, and I never liked it. I first practiced in a small firm in Rhode Island, and we did everything there, literally every kind of law. It was a small general practice firm, everything from bankruptcy, personal injury, contract, representation, you name it, we did it, even some criminal law. I went to the motion calendar, I prepped for a jury trial, but we wound up settling. It was a great experience, and I can't say I loved it there, but I liked the people I was working for, so I stayed where I was. And then Mike had an opportunity to come down to D.C. He had been working for the Rhode Island Public Utilities Commission, and he had a job offer from the FERC, and we decided to move down here. And I had the dickens of a time finding a job. It was during a recession similar to what we have going on right now in the legal profession, and there really wasn't anything out there. No one was hiring, but I did find a job eventually. I took a Virginia bar when we moved down here, and I really looked for a job without much luck, and I finally found a job working for a family law practitioner, and I always thought that would be a very interesting area of law for me to practice in. I would be helping people, it would be interesting. I could apply common sense. I was very naive. Foolish, naive, all those words you
Aren't
can
they
think
the
of.
kind of practitioners that often do divorce work?
Yes.
Where nobody's happy usually.
Exactly right. And
Yeah.
in fact, I learned after the fact that
Mhm.
you went to this particular attorney, who will go unnamed here, if you want to give your soon-to-be former spouse a really hard time. And I did not like it at all. Not at all. The tactics used, everyone you saw was at one of the worst points of their lives.
Mhm.
And I think I might have lasted there 6 or 8 weeks. And I sort of stepped back at that point, and I really thought about what was I doing with my career. I was young. I was 2 years out of law school, so I think I was 25, 26, something like that. And I thought back about what I really liked doing, which, going back to my undergraduate days, which was researching, writing, and I still really wanted to work with people, but in a positive way, not in a destructive way, not being constantly in an argument with people, and not waiting around, which is what I did a lot in Rhode Island. You wait for the motion calendar, you wait for the judge, you wait for the jury. So I thought about what I wanted to do, and I thought, well, maybe I'll become a law librarian. I worked with law librarians in the library at WashU, and I thought, well, I need to speak to some people about the profession and whether it would be a good fit for me. So that's when I first met you. Even before I started working as a law librarian, I went around to you. I spoke to Gary McCann here at American, and you'll laugh about this. I remember seeing you. I don't remember what we talked about. And obviously, I'm still working, so it must have been positive. I only remember the building as being dark and pretty awful.
Yes, we had the one we're in today is pretty nice.
Yes, it is.
And you're going to get an even nicer one in about 2
certainly are.
years.
We
but
certainly are.
we had some other buildings before that on campus that were, shall we say, less nice than this
Oh my
one.
goodness.
Yeah.
And I also spoke to Marlene McGurl, who I subsequently went to work for
With the
at
Library
the
of
Law
Congress.
Library of Congress, and Bob Oakley, who I also went to work for a very long time at Georgetown, Anita Head, and a couple of other people. And I sort of did my data collecting.
Whatever Gary McCann must have said to you must have been the important part, because you're basically in his old
I
job.
am
He's been retired about as long as in fact, exactly as
Right.
long as I have. We
Right.
retired the same day,
Right.
10 years ago this summer.
I tell people I'm the shorter female version of Gary McCann.
Mhm. Well, I better not say anything more. He'll shoot me if he when he sees this interview if I say anything more about him.
I hear you. And then I enrolled in library school at Catholic University for an MLS. And so I started there, I guess, in either maybe the winter of 1983, something like that.
Mhm.
And I first worked as a librarian for a smallish firm,
Mhm.
a tax firm, Tucker Flyer, Sanger and Lewis, which is no longer in existence.
Yeah.
While I was going part-time to school. And then I was fortunate enough to be hired by Marlene McGurl at the Law Library of Congress.
Mhm.
That was a terrific experience for any librarian. They have had and have a terrific collection of just incredible material. And I worked there for about a year and a half, and took off some time for when my oldest daughter was born.
Mhm.
I took off about 6 or 8 months, and then I went to work for Bob Oakley at Georgetown.
Well, getting back to your first introduction to those of us here at American. It was a different facility,
Very
darker.
different.
And I was thinking, your era at the Library of Congress, it must have still been before they had the new, is the Madison building?
No, they were in the they had just moved to the Madison building
Well,
a
then
few
it
years.
was a tremendous improvement in their
Yes.
facility, because
Oh.
I remember in the original building, they were so cluttered, and they built library stacks and created office spaces in them, and it was very different than it became after they got the other building.
And it was literally trial by fire. It was such a busy reference desk. People would literally line up
Yeah.
to get assistance. And I met some great friends there that I'm still very close working with,
Yep.
Phil Berwick and Steve
Oh, yeah.
Hinckley and Linda Corbelli at the
Yeah.
Supreme Court.
Mhm. Now, Marlene McGurl, who is your leader there, she used to teach, as I recall,
I
at
took
Catholic.
her-
Did you take her
I
course?
did. I
People
took
used
her
to say
classes.
very good things about it.
Well, I taught the class at Catholic when she stopped teaching it.
Uh-huh.
So I learned a great deal from her, even though I had been to law school.
Mhm.
And you might laugh about this. Bernie Reams was my legal research teacher at WashU.
Oh, yeah, I know Bernie.
Yeah. So I had his classes there, but I learned a tremendous amount from her,
Yeah.
both in the
Yeah, I had heard so much over the years when she was still teaching it of how
Mhm.
excellent it was. And of course, we hired a few people who'd gone
Mhm.
through the program, and
Mhm.
they came in pretty much turnkey colleagues.
Right.
They knew their business.
right.
Yeah, that was good. Well, it sounds like you've had sort of an interesting career at various points. Now, there's sort of a difference. You've been in different kinds of libraries. You were at the Library of Congress and Georgetown. But here at American, you are because it's a little different structure, you're actually a tenured track faculty member,
Well-
as are the librarians.
Correct.
And I know you're tenured, so I know you are not only good at what you do, but you're good at doing the things to
get
convince
tenure.
provosts and others that
Right.
as well, that you're good. Do you have any thoughts about some of the differences
Well, I've worked in both places.
in two types of structures,
At
faculty and non-faculty?
At Georgetown, not only were we in a separate building, and I actually worked there when we were in the same building as the faculty, but there really was not much interaction with librarians and faculty. I don't know if that's still the case. But being tenured, I have a role in this governance of a law school.
Mhm.
So I'm able to serve on the admissions committee. I'm able to participate. I don't vote in law faculty decisions.
I
but
think only Billy
contribute.
Joe does that.
That's
but,
right.
But
She has
you're
a
a part of
dual
your own
appointment.
faculty here in the law library.
That's right.
And you do vote at their
do.
tenure
We do.
decisions and so on, yes.
We do.
Yeah.
But being tenured has given me the ability to participate in a larger way
Mhm.
in the law school, and I found that to be very, very valuable.
Mhm. It's interesting in that I think others, I certainly, of course, I had a dual appointment. I was on both faculties.
Mhm.
So I was sort of expected to be part of both.
Mhm.
But I think it does, it's a burden in a sense, in that you've got your regular job and then you have this other.
Correct.
But the dimensions of that it seems to add to you. You sound like you enjoy
I do.
being involved in
You get a
other
wider feeling for the institution, a deeper feeling. Some of my colleagues serve on the Senate, of the
Mhm.
University Senate. They're active in heading committees on the main campus.
Yeah.
Do all kinds of things. And that's not an opportunity at places that don't have the tenure structure.
Mhm.
Now, at Georgetown, we did have multi-year contracts. The thing that is different, the main difference, besides the participation in governance activities, is the scholarship. There was no writing requirement for me at Georgetown, where I was for 12 years. Although I wrote a few shorter articles while I was there. And one of the things I did as part of my job was managing their publications. So I wrote a lot, but it was all for Georgetown.
Mhm.
Wasn't published outside. And here, the scholarship is a wonderful opportunity, but I can see can be a burden to some people
Mhm.
because we're required to publish as part of not just the tenure track process, but beyond.
Mhm.
This summer, I have the wonderful opportunity of taking sabbatical. My
Mhm.
actual last day here is
Yes,
Thursday.
I remembered that. It's one of the
Yes.
reasons we were able to slip you in today,
Exactly.
and if I'd waited a little while, I might have missed you until
Right.
after your sabbatical. but-
Right. So, and I hope to write a textbook,
Uh-huh.
a digital textbook, online textbook for advanced legal research.
Mhm.
And that's I mean, I can hardly believe I'm going to be able to do that. And I get 2 summers, so I'm very much looking forward to it.
That's right. I think you have the option of taking time in the academic year
Correct.
or a couple of summers.
Right. But that would have been difficult for my colleagues to have me gone
They
during
would
the
have
semester.
to shoulder the load
That's right.
without you here.
That's
yes.
right.
Yeah, that's
so,
true.
Doing it as best as I can over the summers and before we move in 2015, because
Mhm.
of course I want to be here.
Well, I think a faculty role, of course, having filled one myself, and not really knowing much else except when I
Mhm.
was still in school,
Mhm.
when I was a librarian, even when I was
Mhm.
in library school, at a place where you were more of a staff member,
Mhm.
academic staff we were called, as opposed to, I guess, whatever other kind there is. But it was not faculty. And
Mhm.
but having been in a faculty role ever since, it was something that I relished, and I enjoyed governance. You get to know people.
You get to know people.
Have you mentioned some of the colleagues have worked on things at the University Senate.
Right.
So outside of the law school as well as inside. Have
Exactly.
you had any experiences on the main
I
campus?
have not. I've been on the admissions committee for 7 or 8 years now,
Mhm.
and that really takes up a great deal of my
That
time.
is a workhorse committee
Yes.
because you have all those files
Files
to
to
read.
read,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So I haven't, like some of my colleagues here,
Mhm.
I've gone over to work at the main campus.
Well, you see, you should go around to the first year classes then and say, look here, I got you in this place. Now there's a quid pro quo.
Well-
No, I think you've been in trouble doing that.
My colleagues always say that when we have a problem with a student, it's my fault.
That's the other side of that coin. Yeah, that's the flip side.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've enjoyed the faculty role. And,
I have.
And I imagine, not everybody is into that kind of thing.
No.
Some people who are more focused on the more traditional role that librarians may play elsewhere, without the extra committee assignments
Right.
and the publication assignments
Right.
and so on. But
Right.
and I can understand. We need both kinds in the profession.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I think that it's important for librarians, law librarians especially, to understand and participate in student life in some
Mhm.
way, whether it's by teaching in a formal class, as I do,
Mhm.
or by working with student organizations, just so they can know what is actually going on. I don't think we can assume at this point. This is the born digital generation, and they really don't think like people of my generation or your generation do. They come with different skills,
That's right.
different
Yeah,
expectations.
everything I read is that today's students. I have a friend who's in my age bracket, and she had some problem with trying to watch a disc recording she had visiting somebody in the hospital, and she brought
A CD or
a
a
CD
DVD.
along, but it was a Blu-ray, and they didn't have a Blu-ray player. And her grandson, who's 6, immediately knew what was wrong. He said, "Well, Grandma, that is a Blu-ray, and the machine is a DVD." He knew the difference. She had no clue, except that it wouldn't work.
And even when students come to the reference desk, they'll have, 15 windows open on their PC or their Apple computer, and in a cascade way. And I don't think like that, but they can deal with that. And working
I know
with them is an
sometime I end up with a
eye-opener.
lot of windows open because I'm disorganized, and I'll do something and I move to something else and I don't close anything, and then I go and have to close all these windows at the end.
Right.
But it works. Yeah. In addition to your work here on the campus and in prior jobs, you've actually served our profession in a lot of other ways. You've been a member, of course, of ALL and its DC chapter, the Law Librarian Society of Washington, D.C., and in various roles in those associations, including in some cases chairmanship or chair roles of committees and so on. You also have a rather impressive list of professional presentations at meetings and so on. A good reputation as somebody that people find useful to listen to when you say something. Do you have any thoughts about this role and whether our younger colleagues should be encouraged to get out there, and why or why not?
I think it's vital. Working in AALL and in LLSDC has, first of all, you learn so much at the annual convention about what's going on in the profession, what are the issues your colleagues think are important that you might not have struck you. But the contacts you make, the informal contacts, if I have this just happened a couple of weeks ago. I had a faculty member who, let's just say, waited to the last possible moment to realize she needed a source that was very obscure, but I found it at the University of Connecticut, and I emailed actually Darcy Kirk and
an old friend, and colleague
former
from
colleague,
Georgetown,
and also and we got the document for her that day, and it was really important because this was a brief she was working on that was due at 5 o'clock, and just having the context, being able to flip open the AALL directory and seeing who's in Indiana we can call, who do we know in Indiana that we can call for something, is invaluable. And it's a wonderful community. Everyone is very positive. Everyone, we do have our unique perspectives and needs and personalities, but at the end of the day, everyone wants to contribute something positive, however you get there. And I've always been very enthusiastic about the profession and about the future of the profession. Because, as I like to tell people, we are problem solvers, no matter whether we're in technical service and our catalogers or digital librarians to, the line reference librarians.
Let me tell you one story of my own in terms similar to what you and Darcy worked out for this faculty member. Years ago here in Washington, I was newly named director at American. I'd been here maybe a year or two, and of course I was beginning to know my colleagues at the other places. And one was a guy named Hugh Bernard, who was the director, or law librarian as we called ourselves in those days, at GW. And I remember one day Hugh called up in a complete panic. The dean needed something very fast, and the book was missing from the shelf.
Oh.
My hunch was the dean had it in his office someplace and had lost it, forgotten it.
Has happened before.
And Hugh was in a complete panic, and fortunately, and this was before we had access to each other's catalogs, I checked and we did have the book, and I checked and we did have the book on the shelf too. So I had the book that he needed, and I sent it over by cab, and he had it within about 30 minutes.
And he was a hero, and so
and
were
he
you.
was a hero, and from then on, he owed me big time, and that was...
Well, there's always that.
I don't think I ever was able to really collect, but it was fun to know that I had been helpful. So it just gave me a good feeling that it was nice. It's sort of like you and Darcy, with this
Right.
information from the University of Connecticut. Yeah.
So just these contacts. I also, there's a couple things I want to make a point of. Whenever I can, I help younger colleagues, people new to the profession.
Mhm.
That's another way of working with AALL, being a mentor, reaching out to younger people, new people to the profession. Actually, they don't have to be younger, they can just be new.
Oh, that's right. Not everybody is
that's right.
20
And
when they enter
that's
the
right.
field.
And helping people, getting to know them, and working with them.
Mhm.
When I think I briefly mentioned that I taught the legal literature class at Catholic
That's right.
for a bunch of years.
After Marlene had
Right,
done
and
it
it
for a
was
while.
it was a wonderful opportunity, and every now and then I'll get one of my students back.
Mhm.
They'll contact me. Just a couple months ago, one of my former students is the head of the library at DOJ, which is great, and one is the director at, I think he's at DePaul, and it's wonderful to see them successful. Whether in a formal, whether I meet them through a formal way, through the class, or whether it's through just AALL working with people on committees and so on. So that's, and I get a big kick out of that. I think that's fun and a good thing to do. And one of the reasons I came back to academia, after I left Georgetown, I went to a firm.
Mhm.
I was the branch manager well, first I was the librarian, and then they merged with a much larger Philadelphia firm. And I loved working with the associates there, but I really wanted to go back and work with the law students. And that's what I do most of my time here.
Mhm.
And the perspective from a law firm librarian, I really took to heart in my work here with students, in terms of cost-effective and authoritative research, looking in the right place, doing a complete research work on something. It gave me a very unique perspective on time and money that many academic law librarians don't have in a
That's
real
right.
way.
We have been, I don't know if the word is blessed or cursed, by essentially having non-billed usage
That's
time,
right.
Basically unlimited usage for a flat fee for ourselves and for our
Right.
students. And
Right.
one can develop some, shall we say, inefficiencies.
One does, yes.
And I've heard for years from colleagues in the real world, the firm colleagues, that you guys need to, and academics need to be doing something to teach these people coming into our field how to do this in a way that doesn't bankrupt us or the clients.
Well, I think it's much harder to do legal research now
Mhm.
than it was when I went to law school. When I went to law school, you knew what you had, and you
Mhm.
had what you had. There were the books, there were the Shepherds,
Yeah.
that was it. But now there's so much out there. It's too much, really,
Yeah.
too much to choose from. Not just for the pay databases, but for the free databases.
Mhm.
And I spend a lot of time teaching my students how to evaluate them and when to use the free materials and
Mhm.
when not to. Because you alluded to the cost of using Lexis and Westlaw. It depends on where they go. Some clients don't care, and some clients care very much.
I suspect that when the bottom line really gets looked
They
at,
care.
everybody cares to
Right.
some extent.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Now the flip side of that, I was talking to a partner in I won't name the firm, but a very large one with
Mhm.
offices in many cities. And he pointed out that, of course, a lot younger associates in his firm had a certain incentive to bill extra time. And if they could waste time doing research, that in a sense that might be perceived as helping them get ahead.
Those days are over, though.
I'm sure.
I think with the current legal climate, some firms are moving not to bill first-year associates. And I view my job as making these new associates ready to research efficiently and very well right off the bat, and that increases their
Well,
value.
I think in the best of all circumstances, what you're doing is exactly right. And, you know, these younger, mostly younger people coming out into the profession don't have the opportunities, perhaps, that generations ago lawyers had to kind of learn on the job. We've seen this in the whole development of the clinical programs in the law schools in the last couple of generations or so for the same reason. It needs some practical training in certain ways to supplement what you get in the theoretical classroom settings. Now, in preparing for this interview, you and I talked a little bit, and there are no secrets. I mean, I've mentioned this in other interviews that I do chat with, and we work a little bit about what we're going to talk about. But you mentioned something that was sort of important in your life some time back. You had a young daughter. Two. And you were in a situation where you had the opportunity to have some flexibility when it came to having to take care of your obligations as a mother or parent, and the jobs, and
so
that law librarianship helped. Something about it helped in that. Could you talk a little bit about that?
I was able to work part-time while I was at Georgetown and while I was at the firm subsequently before I came here. And I worked various schedules at Georgetown. For much of the time I was there, when my kids were in school, I would work while they were in school, and I would leave at 2 o'clock, and people used to laugh at me because they would say I would rocket out of there, leave everything on my desk, and go home to pick my kids up from wherever they were. And I was very lucky. I knew that then, and I know it now. I was very lucky to have that flexibility. You know, it certainly had an impact on my career, for good or bad, but I have no regrets. You know, my husband is a litigator, and I never felt it was fair to my kids not to have either parent around. And I gave back, though, as much as I could to both the firm and to Georgetown. I took calls after I was gone, and then when email and mobile devices came up, I would answer emails, as I do now. But it was wonderful being able to be there for my daughters while they were growing up. And I was able to go part-time until my younger daughter got her driver's license and could drive herself. So it worked out
at 16,
very well.
She was old enough to look out for herself, huh?
That's
and could get herself there
That's
to do
right.
it.
And she was very responsible, so it did work out.
Well, you know, I share a little of that same kind of background in a different way. Carol and I, my wife Carol, we had 2 young children when I was first at American, actually, and Carol was, for a few years, she was out of the workforce, and then she was a faculty in School of Nursing, first at Catholic U and later at Georgetown. And there were a lot of accommodations to having young kids that were necessary. For example, we always structured our teaching so that the day I taught class, she didn't, and vice versa. So if somebody really got sick at home, one or the other of us could actually stay home with them without disrupting all the students in our class. And she also was, like yourself, able to structure her workday when they were very young, so she could be home, so we didn't have latchkey kids. And the difference is she and I are a shade older than you are, so we were the beginning of where both spouses were working, and there was a lot of, you didn't have the daycare
Right.
system quite like you have today. You had daycare, but it wasn't
Right.
as well organized or as plentiful and available. And so it was hard. It was hard to be a parent and work, but we had the same kind of accommodation in a little different way. And I always felt that working in the university setting, in my case and in her case, was one of the fringe benefits that you've had. And I had seen it with a lot of my faculty
Right.
colleagues, including at least one or two in the law library over the years here as
And
well, when they had young kids.
if I had stayed in the practice of law, I don't think I would have had that flexibility.
That doesn't surprise me.
Right.
Lawyers tend to be, we're trying to make a living here, and that means you've got to put in the time and the effort.
I think most of the women I went to law school with eventually, not everyone, but eventually many left the profession.
That's sort of too bad. I
It is too
read
bad.
from time to time that some of the profession has accommodated that sort of change in reality, but I imagine it's
It's
still,
a big effort.
yeah, I imagine there's still a lot that don't.
Right.
Yeah. Well, sort of with that all said, we're getting sort of towards the end of the interview. Is there anything, Adeen, that you would like to add that we haven't talked about?
Just that I'm still excited by the law librarianship. It's been a great career for me. I appreciate the opportunities I have. Going to China in a couple of weeks to speak to the CAFL conference. And I really appreciate the support that the law school and the university has provided for travel and professional education over the years. I find it, I love working with my colleagues in the library, both the staff and the professional librarians, my tenure track and tenured colleagues, and working with Billy Joe. She has a big role in the
Well,
law
I
school.
understand, yeah, I see
In
bits and
addition-
pieces of it.
In
yeah.
addition to being the director, and it's a wonderful wonderful opportunity. We're at sort of the law schools are at the beginning of an uncertain period, and I hope to find a way to contribute in a positive way to this, what people are calling the crisis in legal education. We're working on reducing the number of print copies of many materials
Yeah.
because they're not used by law students, because they're
And
expensive.
it's very expensive to maintain the
Correct.
space for them too. I mean,
Right.
we saw the law firms have to do this some years ago when I was still active, and law students, and somebody's paying for all the space that law schools use. It's got to be
Right.
used effectively.
We're not getting any additional room
Mm-hmm.
or space in the new building. I hope, anyway, we're going to maintain the same square foot or footage, or very similar. Going forward, what I'd really like to help contribute to is continuing education for our alums. I don't think law school resources, the library resource, should end at graduation. And I've done some things to make our alums have access to resources after they graduate, and we certainly have some services available to them. But making that transition to practice, especially when it's so difficult for many of our students to find positions or find good positions, I think is very important and really vital for academic librarianship. If we don't have students, we won't be here. So we need to contribute in whatever way we can.
I certainly wouldn't want to have been a librarian in a law school with no students, not so much because there wouldn't be any revenue coming in, but all the fun things of
All the-
having the students there every day and what happens and
Right.
goes on and their
Right.
enthusiasm and so on.
I'm afraid we're going to see some law schools closing
Wouldn't surprise me from what I read.
in the next few years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and who knows?
Who knows is right.
Society, I guess, ultimately adjusts in terms of supply and demand, and maybe there are too many newly minted lawyers coming through the system now, and
Perhaps.
needs to be fewer. We'll wait and see.
Right.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Adeen, for talking to us this afternoon.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it, and
I
I
want
feel
to
very
thank you
humbled
again.
being-
You have basically coordinated. We did, or I did 4 of these interviews here today, and you organized the place. You and Billy Joe, and even hosted us a nice little lunch beforehand. I got a free meal out of it. I always enjoy free meals, as you know. And it was a good one, too.
Well,
a
it
lot of
was-
conversation with people who I remembered from when I was here, and a few
Mhm.
new ones. And, yeah, it was a delightful afternoon.
It was
here.
wonderful having you.
Thank
and
you.
I always like hearing about the earlier days here.
Well,
in
you watch a
American.
few of these interviews, and you'll pick up a lot of those tidbits.
I bet I will.
Yeah, and we'll be adding. We've got a group of them up now, but we're adding several a month, and that's the plan because there has to be stuff done to them.
Right.
Even after I finish my role,
Sure.
they have to be add the captions so people can read if they need to. And who knows what other value-added things the Hine Company does, but it's been wonderful being part of this, and I'm glad you've enjoyed it this afternoon.
Thank you again.